If you're in the middle of that, you can go ahead and wrap it up. Also, all month long, we keep that account open so that we can just continue to be generous to our local partners, helping them go further, faster. And today we've got a lot of, you got Fourth Sunday for the city. We're going to celebrate baptism at the end. And for many of you, you're still here. You've made it all the way through October, and these 4 weeks of conversation about money, conversation about this let's build our future we've been talking about, which if you came prepared today, you've been in a place of listening to God and you've said, how is he inviting me to participate with my church in this journey of expansion? There's no fancy thing we're doing. We're just inviting you to take this card. There's 4 boxes on the back wall. We'd love for you to participate in that way. We know that journey's not over. You may still be in the process, and we want to encourage you to continue to walk that road. I want to give you an update, though. It's encouraging. Coming into this morning, the pledges that have come in at this point, it's $1.5 million has been raised towards our $2.5 million goal. So super excited about that. It's looking like an $8 million project. I won't go into details. I have the last 3 weeks. You should have questions about that. And we'll have ongoing conversations, but if you swing out in the lobby, there's going to be folks there, a couple of our board members following service can chat about some of that project with you. Here's the challenge in this 4 Boise series. So if you're a guest today, you're walking into the final week of a conversation we've been having. If you've been here week in and week out, there's been these linked conversations. One has been about this practical project in front of us as a church community to make more room for people to encounter the goodness of Jesus Christ. But the other part has been, okay, but how do we live our lives? And these two are, they keep doing this. They get connected, but also I'm trying to pull them apart and say, this isn't really like a strategy, a fundraising strategy. Any of you in fundraising, you've probably realized I'm not a great fundraiser at this point. What it is, though, is it's a life conversation. And I've had some folks grab me. I'll pick on our teenagers first. We have a few in the room. I had one of our students grab me and go, when's this money series going to be over? Because I don't have any. And I thought, okay, fair play, right? But here's the thing. I can promise you, if you're a student right now, money is going to be far too important to you your entire life, right? So you don't have it yet, but you should sit in the conversation. Let's shift gears. Let's talk about marriage, okay? Let's say that you're in this room right now and you're not married, or you're not in a significant relationship, but you do want to know how to have a healthy relationship. You do want to know how to commit yourself in a trusting way to somebody. And you lean into all that, and we're talking about marriage. You should listen. You should listen so that you can gain wisdom for the future opportunities and moments that are come in your life. I feel like this conversation is the same way. And I also feel like, if I'm being really honest with you, we all care way too much about money. I have yet to meet a human being who doesn't care about money. Jesus even said, talking to poor people who were outcasts and oppressed by the Roman government, he spoke at lengths about money to them and said things like, it's really hard to have 2 masters. You can't serve money and God. Those two are going to be in conflict with each other. So this is not a new conversation. It's an ongoing one. And we're going to tackle it today by walking our final road, looking at our final question, and then wrapping up this 4 Boise conversation, because that's really what the conversation's about. It might be about your money, might be about your time, might be about your emotion, might be about your anger or your regret or your guilt. It's whatever it is in your life that's motivating you. How can you open that up, release it so you can be good for your neighbor? You can be good for your school. You can be good for your city, good for your work, good for your relationships, good for your own heart. That's the road we're going to walk. So I want to just start out then by asking you a question. Have you ever been this is kind of the Sunday where I guess we go from theory to it got real. All right? We move to a topic that gets real. And for me, I was thinking about what's a time when things got real for me. And it was I've got 4 kids. My oldest is 26. I'm going to talk about my kids a little bit today. And I remember when Gabe was born. Gabe was born in Western Pennsylvania. I was young. We read What to Expect When You're Expecting. How many of you was at your parenting book? All right, a little generational opportunity there, right? We read What to Expect When You're Expecting. We had our go bag with all of our hospital goodies. It was time. We went to the hospital. They took good care of us. Our firstborn was son. We ordered a pepperoni pizza, because why not? After you have your first baby, we ate that right there. We had a good time. And then the next morning, the nurse said, hey, you guys are good. You know what you're doing. You can go home. They wheeled my wife down in a wheelchair. Emily had Gabe in her arms. I was a proud dad. I grabbed our Honda Civic, pulled it around. The car seat was properly attached. They wheel her out, and all of a sudden, the nurse leans in the car, checks the car seat, and goes, have a good life, and she leaves. Parents, you remember this, right? You're like, wait, you're not coming home with us? Like, we don't know what to do with this baby at all. Like, we know nothing. I'm a larger person. I was scared I was going to break him every time I touched him in any way. And they've got me holding this little 7-pound child in a 5-point safety harness thing. I'm trying to put him in. His arms, I don't want to pop his arms off. I don't know what to do. And I thought, this just got real. It shifted from theory, from what to expect when you're expecting, to actually executing on it and having a child that you take home, that you feed, that you change their diaper, that you bathe. That was, for me, that's one of the most tangible moments. I still look back and I go, I can't believe they don't have more like post-baby classes. They don't make you stay at the hospital for like a week and make sure you should go home with a child, right? But they just do, right? And what we all find is there's these moments where something moves from theory to reality. I want to talk about that today. It moves from someday to right now. So we do a question on the morning. I want to invite you to turn to your neighbor and actually just chat about this, right? So maybe you don't have kids, or maybe that's not your connection. That's okay, but you might have been on 8th Street last night having a great time with like 8 friends. You're not drinking because you're doing like a no booze October, no booze November thing, but everyone else is drinking. They order a bunch, right? And then there's apps everywhere, and you're trying to get healthy, so you're not eating apps, and you just get a salad. You're kind of excited how much money you saved. And then one of your friends goes, let's just split the bill. Right? And it gets real all of a sudden. You're like, wait, $8 of that is mine, and my portion's 40, right? So here's your question. Share a time when things got real with your neighbor. We'll be back in 1 minute, and we'll jump into the message. All right, take 10 seconds. Okay. So here's the thing. This shouldn't be a surprise, right? Our heartbeat is to inspire each other to follow Jesus and deepen our faith and relationship. As a church, that's why we gather. That's what we're about. We believe it's got an outcome so that we can really love our neighbor and that we can reach the next generation. That's just a hill we want to die on over and over and over, to stand in the corner of the next generation. So when we think about what that looks like, all of our conversations are just feeding into that. How do we do that in our daily jobs? How do we do that in our daily lives? How do we do that with our thought life and the things we wrestle with, the thoughts that both propel us forward and the thoughts that hold us back? And I was thinking about where we go today, and it really is where we go from, like, I think faith is often encouraging to talk about. It's good to wonder about and hope about and wrestle with, whether you've grown up in a faith environment or you haven't, and you're entering into a new season in your life. But then there's the point where that also turns to something called obedience, which is not really like a winning conversation with anybody. Like, I want to talk to you about obedience today, right? That doesn't work very well, yet that's where faith, where it gets real all of a sudden. So what we're going to do today is we're just going to wrap up this like survey of the Christian life that tackles, like, so what does it mean to follow Jesus, to be with him and be like him? How do we approach our money and our time and our skills and our habits? And how do we approach our relationships and our anger and our joy? What filter all that, right? Well, it's probably oversimplified, but it's a journey. It begins with surrender. It actually doesn't begin with you scaling up some new skill or opportunity in your life. It begins with you letting go. Letting go. Then it turns to listening. That's the relational side of it, that God wants to be in relationship with you because he has wisdom for your life. And then it turns to obey. So this month we walked through each of these, and we're going to end today with obey. And here's the thing I've realized. There's no linear through line in this conversation. There's no like, hey, obey, here's the definition, go be a good Christian and do the obey thing. Or like, I feel like, and I don't normally have a linear, those of you who this year church are like, nothing I do is linear, so you're not shocked with that. But I think what I would say is, but when we get to this, it's because of your life and my life and who we are as people. We're complicated. We're even convoluted. We're definitely complex, right? And so when you think about all of that, obey is going to be highly personal. There's not going to be a point where what Jake does to obey is going to be what I do to obey. We live very different lives in different contexts. And so I want to tell four unique stories of what obedience looks like as it comes out of as surrender and listen. I'm going to start with mine, with a story that happened in my life, and we're going to turn to three stories from the scripture. I said we'll talk a little bit about my kids today because when you're a parent, a lot of your relationship with God and what that looks like begins to filter into how you think about your kids. So I have four kids. We lived in Redwood City, which is on the peninsula south of San Francisco in California. And it was time for our kids to all get registered for school. Now, my wife, Emily, and I say we love Jesus, right? I think that's what guides our life, how we treat people, how we think about our time, but not so much how we think about our kids and their opportunities. We want our kids to have great opportunities no matter what. We want to fight for them and create space for them and put them in the right lanes that they're going to get where they need to go. And Redwood City was a complicated city education-wise because you could have two schools right next to each other, one highly resourced. Their parent-teacher organization would raise $1 million at their fall gala. All right? And then the one right next to it, just 2 miles away, their parent-teacher organization would scrape together $10,000 selling chocolate candy bars, world's best chocolate, outside of Safeway week after week after week, having the kids go sell these. I mean, that was the difference in these two schools, just their fundraising ability. And it was time to register our kids for school. Our kids were going to Roy Cloud. Roy Cloud is the school with the opportunity. We were in the district where they could go there. But we also lived on the line. They could have also gone to Roosevelt. My kids are not going to Roosevelt. Roosevelt is a dead-end opportunity for them. It's dropping enrollment. No one wants to teach there. The school's out of control. We're not sending our kids there. I'm not going to mess my kids up with a bad education decision. I'm in Chicago for an event, and my wife's at registration, right? My wife has this darn heart for justice thing that always messes up our life. And so... So she's there, and I get a phone call. She goes, hey, I'm in registration. All the schools are in the gym. I don't know how we do it here because my kids are older now. All the schools are in the gym, though, and she's in the Roy Cloud line. She has a letter that says our kids get to go to Roy Cloud. Parents camped out that night. That's how sought after getting in the good schools was, because it will change your future forever. You can just get your kid in the right school, right? It's such a joke, to be honest with you. I got none of the right schools. I'm a good dad. I'm a decent human being. I like to think I'm a fairly good husband, good neighbor. I've had opportunity. But you don't think that with your kids. With your kids, you're like, we don't want to mess up their lives. And she says, this isn't right. Everybody's politicking, leveraging anything they can do to get into Roy Cloud. And there's one parent in the Roosevelt line. She's got all her kids wrapped around her legs. There's no one staffing the table. So our kids are going to Roosevelt. So my wife, she just takes, and she crosses lines. She's now in the Roosevelt line. She goes, are you okay with that? I trust this woman, right? Yeah, I'm okay with that. I share that. Parents, you can get that, especially those of you who had to make decisions. I share that because Emily always wants to listen to God and obey. And she felt in that moment that we were making a mistake. We were leveraging our opportunity for our kids, for something for us, and missing the way we could bless and serve this other school. So we register our kids for Roosevelt, okay? That school over the next few years turns around, not because the DeVitases are there, but because other community members start to pull in. The district cuts PE, and our church starts to provide PE for the school. The district cuts art programs, and the church starts to step in because the church was nearby. We start to do uplift projects at the school, 800 volunteers over a weekend, just there beautifying the school. The school starts to lift its chin up and go, we matter to this community. Other parents start to enroll their kids in the school. Enrollment gets up, the school gets full. They add 2 extra grades. They become in California a blue ribbon school. I don't know what that means or doesn't mean, but they're super proud of that opportunity. And my kids get a below average education in the process. They miss opportunities that they would have gotten at Roy Cloud, extracurriculars, quality of teaching. And then my daughter, because she goes to the under-resourced, underperforming school, she gets invited to a local girls' private school for a camp so she can get a taste of the good life. She goes to that camp for 1 week and she says, I want to go to school there. And I'm like, I want to be a professional actor. Good job. Super proud of you. She goes, no, Dad, I want to go to school there. It's like a college application. We make her do the whole thing herself, right? She gets accepted, and we say, darn it, because it costs $50,000 a year. I mean, that's a lot of money. And then she gets a full scholarship. And she spends her education getting an incredible education and opportunity. She also spent her education being the one of 2 Christians at her school the entire time. That's an education in itself as well, just to give you some perspective there. She's not here to say that, but I start with that story because in your parent, kids are everything. And to make choices with your kids that cannot be good for them because you feel like the Lord is calling you to do that, that's where faith became real for us. And we just stepped out into it. Now, the downside of that as we move into today's conversation is there's a real risk in all of this, all right? That I toe this line where I say to you, here's the deal. Just learn to obey God. And when you do, you give him 10, he'll give you 100. You give him 100, he'll give you 1,000. So I'm going to Kenya next week to meet up with our Kenyan partners and look at our summer trip next summer. And I'll tell you, there's a real challenge with how Christianity's been kind of corrupted or polluted in parts of Kenya. It's a wonderful nation. But the largest slum in Africa is in Kenya. It's in Nairobi. People move there for opportunity. You know who else moves there for opportunity? I'm going to say pastors. Pastors who have a message for people. Give us everything you have, and God will make you rich. And so surrounding the largest slum in Africa are mansions of these mega prosperity gospel. And I don't normally talk negatively about, but I just can't say, like, that's the downside of this conversation today. They send out into the slums. Give us everything you make, everything you have, and God will get you out of this slum. He's going to get you in a great house. He's going to get you everything you need. And the people give it over and over and over. That's one side of how this conversation can go. Please don't hear that. The other side of it is that God is good. And if you learn how to surrender and listen and obey with your life, the things you're afraid of, the things that you might lose, or the opportunities that you feel like you might not be able to grab hold of, they become so secondary to a life lived in dependence on God. And sometimes you can tell a story like I did, where you make a bad education choice for your kids. Now, if my kids all stood up here, they would all say my parents made the best possible choice they could have made, because we learned how to love people who weren't like us. We learned that we weren't the center of the universe. We learned that our lives are about, I'm really thankful for that, because it could be different. I don't know what they say to their therapist, but that's what they might say if they were up here, all right? So here's what we're going to, that's a story for me that ties in. Let's roll through. I want to introduce you to the widow of Zarephath. We're going to actually be in the Old Testament. We're going to be in 1 Kings, and it's the account of like Israel and their heart faithfulness to God and what happens in that place. And this story happens during one of the dark, I'll give some background because not everyone's familiar, which is okay. All right, it happens one of the darkest spiritual and economic times in the history of ancient Israel in the Old Testament. There's a king, his name's Ahab. Ahab is wildly unfaithful to God, and he dabbles a lot in worshiping all sorts of false gods. And there's a queen, her name is Jezebel. All right, and between the two of them, they've led the nation into idol worship. Now here, I used to always say, like, whoever wants to name their kid Jezebel? And one time someone was like, so I don't say that anymore. But Jezebel's not often associated with like a big winning name, good for the universe type name. God sends the prophet Elijah to confront this idolatry. And Elijah, part of this journey is he declares that there's going to be a drought. That drought's going to be hard, but we got to get our attention and pay attention to what matters most, and the drought's going to help us do that. There's all these back and forths, and Elijah fears for his life, and he ends up running and hiding out. And he's hiding out in a cave, and God provides for him miraculously. So the first story contains this miraculous element, right? And he's provided ravens bring him food. And he has this brook that never runs out, and he can drink from it. And so he's good. And then the brook dries up. He goes, what am I going to do? There's a drought. There's a famine. The birds aren't feeding me anymore, and there's no water for me to drink. And God says to him, the word of the Lord came to him. I want you to go at once to Zarephath in the region of Sidon and stay there. I've directed a widow there to supply you with food. Now, this is good news. God's going to hook him up with like a sugar, like you go get this. She's a widow. You're a single guy. She's got resources. Let's go take care of this. Now, here's the thing. Zarephath is a Phoenician province outside of Israel. This is a kind of ironic and powerful interaction that he's about to step into, because God is sending him, a Jewish prophet, to a Gentile widow. And if you know a little bit about the story of Scripture, this is a big distinction right here. He's heading into the heartland of where the false gods are worshipped. That's where he goes. And this woman is a single mother. Turns out she's not loaded. She's a single mom. She has one son, and they are starving because there's a drought and a famine. And all she has left is a handful of flour and some oil so she can mix that together and make her final loaf of bread. And Elijah comes to her and he says, hey, don't be afraid. I know things feel uncertain here, okay? I want you to go home and do as you have said, which is take your flour, take your oil, go home and take care of your family. But will you first make a small loaf of bread for me? And then make something for yourself and your son. And first time I read that, I'm like, wait, what? That's his go-to? Hey, I know you're dying. I know you don't have anything, but could you just give me what you have? And then whatever's left over, just feed me first. And then he says to her this. I said this story's supernatural, right? The jar of flour will not be used up, and the jug of oil will not run dry until the day the Lord sends rain on the land. I want to talk about this widow because she's an unlikely person to obey. She's not a hero in the Bible story. Elijah is. And yet she looks at this man who's a foreigner to her, this man who's an enemy to her, and she takes her flour, she takes her oil, and she makes him a loaf of bread. And she goes home, and she obeys. And what we learn is that God resupplies. And that's the first thing I want to tell you. I've learned that in my life over and over and over. And that's the risk, right? The risk is I say God resupplies, and you hear it's a quid pro quo. And if you decide to lean into that and trust that, you hear I give him a little bit. And I could actually walk through my life. I could tell you story after story after story that do prove that out. But I get worried about what those stories actually say that I don't intend them to say. You know, I've told you my wife gave our rent check to my college roommate who was starting a street ministry for kids. $350, that's how old I am. That's how much rent was at the time. And I thought, this is stupid. This isn't faith. This is stupidity. I didn't say that out loud. That's not good for your marriage. But and then the next day, there are a bunch of groceries on our doorstep. God resupplies. We send our kids to a school that wasn't really the best choice for them. They look back at that, and that's one of the reasons they say they're pretty healthy adults, because of what they saw prioritized in our decision making. God resupplies. I was trying to figure out who Jesus was. I end up in London, become a follower of Christ. I have an opportunity to go live in Tanzania for a while. I've given everything I have. I've just entering this new faith. I don't know what it looks like. There's no credit cards, or there probably was, but I wasn't familiar with them. But there's this opportunity. It feels like I'm supposed to go. Tanzania was a life-changing experience for me. I learned, and pretty much the rest of my life has been living out what I learned over that time. And I go to my little mailbox. I open it up. There's an envelope in there. I open it up, and all the money I need for the trip is sitting there. No, these were all just people like me who had no money. I don't know. It's just like God, when you obey, God resupplies. And here's what happens to the widow. Every day, flour and oil, enough to make a loaf of bread. It just never runs out. It never runs out. And don't get lost on the technicality of it. Stay in the heart of it, right? Because maybe you ask, if I give sacrificially, will God show up? And my answer is yes. I want to challenge and invite you to test that. I'm not talking about this. So this has been together, but I also have to pull them apart. All right? This is not like let's get some money and build a thing. This is about our lives. So when you give sacrificially, give is just your life. When you learn to surrender, to listen, then to be a person of obedience in how you live that out, I promise you, he will show up, but it will be in ways you don't expect. I mean, I keep coming back to this in this series. I did not expect to be serving at a small church in southeast Boise, a city I'd never visited, and a church that was significantly smaller than I was, to be honest with you, interested in serving at. But God opens that. Don't take that in heart. I just come from a different world, okay? And what happened in that was God called us into that, and obedience became clear. We listened, and we said yes, and he has shown up. I mean, in a minute later today when we get to celebrate a baptism, to me, that you want to say God shows up when you say yes? Yes. Just doesn't always look like you think it will. He supplies. Paul to the church in Philippi, he captures this in one of the purest forms. My God will meet all your needs according to the riches of his glory in Christ. That's a very spiritual statement. I believe it's absolutely true with the human heart. Also, my older sister had a complicated pregnancy, complicated because the father was dangerous and she had to flee the state of California. She ended up in Boise, Idaho. I didn't realize this at the time, like the weird full circle connection with Boise. She has my nephew Joshua, and then goes to Dillon, Montana, where my family's relocated. I'm a California kid. I don't know this part of the world, right? But I'm a college student out in Pennsylvania. And I decide the right thing for me to do, as the two of us went through a lot in our lives, is to kind of give up. I'll be the first kid in my family to go through college, right? I'm going to give that up. I'm going to give that up. I'm going to go be with my sister in this time of wild chaos and trauma. And so I fly to Dillon, Montana. It's not a big place. Few people are there. It's a beautiful place. Are from Dillon, right? I get there. We're in Jackson, which is a little town an hour outside of Dillon, 50 people, okay? And that's where I spend my Christmas break. And I've made a decision. My college is over because I pay for every penny. And there's no loan opportunity for me. I can't go back to school. But that was the right choice to make. That's put yourself in that moment, right? I felt like the Lord, I was a new Christian, and he was saying, you take care of your family. So I went. I spent that time with my sister. And then I thought, I'm just going to go back to school and see if I can talk my way into another semester. I'll get another job. I'll make more money. I get back and go to the registrar, and the registrar says, no, what are you talking about? Your semester's paid for. God resupplies. Someone paid my entire semester. Obedience opens the door to provision. There's a gift in obedience in your life. When you finally decide to work through the unforgiveness you hold in your heart, which maybe doesn't look like reconciliation, but definitely looks like letting go of what's holding you, when you finally decide to work through that, what you get on the other side is provision for your heart. The thing you've been wanting and clinging to and hoping for, and the wholeness and healing you've been seeking, you finally start to receive that because you obeyed and took that step and took that risk. Let's look at another story, David. David, most of us know, is the shepherd boy and the stone who fought the giant, the insurmountable odds. We did a series on David where we talked about what a train wreck he was also. He's mostly just a train wreck, okay? And what happens, David's older now. He's no longer that shepherd boy. He is a successful, wildly successful king. And power has slowly and subtly corrupted him. So he calls for a census. These are a little different than, this is new in its time. This was not just about government accountability or knowing where our resources needed to go. David thought, I want to measure how many soldiers I have to see how awesome I am and how great of a king I am. And that decision revealed that he had subtly shifted from relying on God to relying on himself. And even his closest military commander, a guy named Joab, and Joab stuck by David through everything. All the scandals, all the mess. Joab was faithful and just had David's back. This is so scandalous, this idea of taking a census, because David was supposed to trust God in all things. And now he's saying, I'm going to directly trust myself and my resources and my leadership and my ability. Joab says, don't do this, my king. The Lord gives you victory, not the number of your soldiers. And David insists, and the census happens. And immediately after the census, David, as he always does, if you read the Psalms, he wrote a lot of them, you'll see how his heart always comes back. He's like, I was such a fool. I was so proud. And he begins to feel this guilt. He's conscience-stricken. 2 Samuel says, I have sinned greatly in what I have done. Now notice, his sin is not, he's gone out and committed a crime. His sin was he turned his attention and his trust to himself and his faculty and his ability away from the God he had trusted since he was a child. So there's these consequences that come out of that. And a plague sweeps over Israel, and it's devastating. And David decides, he says, look, God is good. I want to build an altar. I was thinking about what an altar is, because we don't do a lot of them. I think it's not a great example, but sometimes when something happens in your life and you go get a tattoo to kind of commemorate, a good tattoo, to commemorate that moment, right? And you're like, this is that, my kid was born, or I lived with these people, we got the street on my thigh or whatever's happening these days, right? And you go, that's like an altar. It's just a thing you remember. And David's like, I want to remember that when I was a fool, God was still good, and he brought me back and he restored me. I want to remember. And so there's this local guy, and the local guy says to David, he's like, David, I'll give you my land and my animals and all my wheat, and you can build an altar for free right here. How easy peasy will that be? And David realizes, he says, no. And just take this in. I will not offer to the Lord my God sacrifices that have cost me nothing. Surrender, listen, obey. Obey orients us. It's like a true north. It puts us in a position where when we're faced with a decision, we lean into God and we listen. And we might think our true north is here. And he's like, no, 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 no. And I said, what an easy out. David can get everything he wants for free. But instead, David buys the land himself. And he builds the altar there. And his heart is restored. And he writes a few songs about that in Psalms, about this journey of this tug of war with God where God's always faithful and generous and good, even though David is not. And I realize obedience will cost you something. Well, I'm a slide behind. Obedience will cost you something, but disobedience costs more. Because this is a spiritual conversation. Here's where I think this plays out the most. If you don't have peace, I'm not going to go at great lengths to define that for you. If you don't have peace in your life, if your heart is angsty, what I would encourage you to do is just do an audit on your obedience to God. Specifically talking to those of you who are followers of Jesus. Just do an audit on that. Sit in that space and figure out, am I actually just choosing a direction in my life, not calling it disobedience, because it's my life, I can do whatever I want, right? Choosing a direction in my life and ignoring the fact that it's costing me my peace. That's been true for me over and over and over. Maybe that's not true for you, but I'd challenge you to test it. Because what I've discovered as it plays out in my day-to-day life is that generosity absolutely reveals my heart. And I've been open with you, I'm not a very generous person. I'm learning, I'm growing up, I'm an adult now. I married a wildly generous person, that was very good for me. I'm not generous with my time. Here's what this looks like, okay? Full disclosure, say I'm at church here. My office is also like a junior high room and a high school room, but it's right off the hallway there. Let's say you decide, I gotta talk to the pastor. So you pop in on like a Wednesday, and I'm here, and you turn, and you're like, hey, Carlos, my first thought is like, oh, come on. I have so much to do, why are you here? That's my first thought. Because I'm selfish. And because I'm not naturally generous. And because I like everybody, I really do. I don't have time for you. I'm sorry. That all happens in my head while I'm smiling at you and saying, hey, how's it going? No one's ever going to talk to me again. You're going to be like, you're a jerk. But when you give out of obedience, it shows who you really trust. And the Lord says to me over and over, dude, you're such an idiot. That's somebody that I love. I just brought them to your doorstep. You want something better than that in your day? That all happens in my head really fast. And then we get to spend time together. It's just one way that plays out for me. I wish I was different, maybe more like you, but actually I think I probably am more like most of you. Generosity reveals the heart. Some of the things that I love too much are my time, my freedom for no one to need anything from me. I've been a dad for a long time. I've been a pastor for a long time. I really like money. You think about that. Obedience orients me, puts me back on the track. And I start to notice that I prefer to give things that don't cost me anything. But when I give something that costs me, man, it's good for my heart. Generosity just reveals that for me. And I begin to live out of trust instead of scarcity and control, right? So I put down, the challenge for us in our lives is don't be gift givers of gifts that cost us nothing. They're not really gifts. Bring a gift that reflects the depth of gratitude and the weight of how thankful you are for the life Jesus has given you. I want to end with Joanna's story. Most of us maybe aren't familiar with Joanna. She's kind of a footnote in the New Testament. She's an interesting person because her story is so powerful, but it's so easy to miss. Her husband's a guy named Chuza. Okay, and here's why Chuza is important. He managed the household of Herod Antipas. Okay, Herod Antipas is just one of those many Herods who are the rulers in the time of Jesus when he's born. He's not a good person, okay? Herod Antipas actually, before Jesus is crucified, Herod Antipas gets to meet with him and he can set Jesus free. And he looks at Jesus and he mocks him. And he's like, this guy's a joke. That's Herod Antipas. Well, Joanna's wife, Chusa, is the manager of Herod's house. And Joanna lives surrounded by power, wealth, influence. She is part of the most important inner circle you could be part of. Her story is also a wild one about courage and costly obedience. So, Jesus heals her. That's what he does to her. Somewhere, somehow, she shows up. This woman of high importance, and Jesus heals her. And she decides to serve him with her life. She financially supports his ministry because Jesus didn't carry a day job once he started going about his ministry, neither did his disciples. She starts to use her husband's money from serving under Herod Agrippa to support the work of Jesus. That could have cost her everything. Here's how we're introduced to her. Just a couple notes about her. Luke records this. He says there were some women who had been cured of evil spirits and diseases. Mary, called Magdalene, kind of a famous Bible name, from whom 7 demons had come out. Joanna, the wife of Chusa, the manager of Herod's household. Susanna, and many others. These women were helping to support them out of their own means. This tells us something really powerful. Joanna didn't just believe in Jesus. She just didn't have a life-changing interaction with Jesus privately. It became real, and her faith influenced and shaped everything about her day-to-day life. She put her faith into action. She truly traded the privilege of the palace where her husband lived and worked and where she would have been welcomed in for the kingdom of purpose of Jesus Christ. She traded those two. She looked at one and said, I'm going to shift my orientation to here and I'm going to live this out. And then we find something out about her. There's only one other thing we know about her. We know so little. She is at the tomb to say goodbye to the dead body of Jesus Christ after his crucifixion. When the disciples are hiding out and afraid, she shows up and she becomes one of the first witnesses of the resurrection. Because obedience repositions us. So if you're happy with your position and you're satisfied with your orientation and you trust in your supply, you don't need obedience until that's gone. We don't have to talk much about how quickly that can be gone. We all know that. It was Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary the mother of James, and the others with them who told this to the apostles. Joanna went to the tomb, found it open, found it empty, found that Jesus had risen from the dead, and got to go back and tell the heavy hitters who were hiding out and afraid. She got to go back and say, it just became real. I think her story brings it all together. She surrendered what she had. She listened to what Jesus asked of her, and then she obeyed, even though it cost her what was familiar. And that's the same invitation for us as we kind of wrap this up. It's to live at this intersection and maybe even this inner insecurity of surrender, listening, and obedience or obey. So for Elijah's widow, the widow from Zarephath, obedience meant giving her last meal. That's her obedience. See, none of these are the same. For David, it meant paying the full price for something that had been offered free to him, to say, this is what I need to do to get my heart right. For Joanna, it meant leaving the palace and becoming a follower of Jesus. And for us, I think it means saying yes to whatever God is calling you into in your life in this moment. It's surrender, listen, obey. And it's linear. Maybe all you'll ever do is spend your life figuring out how to surrender to Jesus because it's a foreign idea. It's hard to wrap your head around. You're not sure if you can really trust him. Maybe that's the only journey you'll get, but please do not jump over surrender and try to get to obey and work up some legal version of trying to be a follower of Jesus or religious, right? It starts with surrender. Maybe your only moment is like the thief on the cross that says, Jesus, I know you are the King of Kings. Remember me in paradise. That's all we got from that guy. He was starting to surrender. We don't get a listen story or an obey story from him. But it's linear. You've got to surrender first. I meet too many Christians that aren't surrendered and are trying to listen and obey. That's crazy talk. Why would you do that? I have no interest in obeying Jesus until I've discovered how good it is to surrender to him. I don't know how you're wired, but that just doesn't work for me. Then you listen because he wants time with you. And he's got wisdom for your life. And he will become the most cherished and important voice And all the voices in your head, most of them are garbage anyways. They're not on your side. Jesus is. And then obey, where it gets real and our faith is lived out. Nothing linear about it. So I'm going to give you a question to think about. We're going to hear Jake's story on video, and then we're going to celebrate baptism.